Damascus steel was more than just a blade, it was myth-made metal, forged in fire and legend. From the 3rd century onward, these swords and daggers claimed near supernatural powers. Warriors said they sliced through lesser weapons as though through paper. They cut clean through armor, then flexed and bent, snapping back into shape like living things. These weapons did more than kill. They announced presence, status, and mastery. They were as much art as arms. They carried whispers of a process so rare and refined that it escaped even the sharpest minds of its time. The very name Damascus steel evokes the exotic traders crossing deserts. Warriors flashing curved blades under the sun, in workshops hidden deep within ancient cities. Though its name suggests origin in Damascus, the steel's roots run deeper and more complex. The core ingredient was Wootz steel, believed to have been imported from southern India or Sri Lanka. Wootz was no ordinary metal. Its high carbon content and trace impurities gave it strange properties. Heated slowly, allowed to cool in a way that preserved its structure, it was forged by those who understood metal not as material, but as life. To the ancient blacksmith, the forge was not merely a toolet, it was a temple. Fire, bellows, hammer, and anvil were extensions of will. The making of a Damascus blade was an act of controlled chaos. Fold the Wootz too many times, and the precious structure within would collapse. Work it too hot or too cold, and the unique carbide bands would fail to form. The steel had to be coaxed, not conquered. Blacksmiths had to learn to read the metal like scripture by watching its color, listening to its pitch, and respecting its boundaries. And when it worked, it was transcendent. The blade became a paradox, hard yet flexible, brutal yet elegant. The signature patterns, feathered, laddered, whirlpooled, were not just visual. They were structural, born from the flow of carbon and iron through a matrix shaped by time, skill, and chance. In each ripple, there was memory. Each line was the ghost of heat and pressure, a fingerprint left by fire. Stories of these weapons spread far beyond their makers. Crusaders returned from the Holy Land bearing tales of Eastern swords that sliced through European armor and shattered Western blades. These were no ordinary weapons, they were instruments of fear and awe. Damascus steel became legend in Europe, sparking a centuries-long obsession with replicating its power. The blades became metaphors for Eastern mystique and technological superiority, fueling both admiration and envy. But imitation proved difficult. Without the original Wootz, without the passed-down knowledge of its treatment, Western metallurgists struggled. Some succeeded in mimicking the look, but the performance remained elusive. It wasn't until the 20th and 21st centuries that scanning electron microscopes began to reveal the secrets. Embedded within the ancient blade's microstructures of carbon nanotubes and cementite lattice invisible to the naked eye. How the ancients achieved this without modern tools remains one of metallurgy's greatest mysteries. It challenged the assumption that advanced tools are required for advanced results. In truth, the decline of Damascus steel came not from failure, but from change. Trade routes shifted. Specific ores used to make Wootz became scarce. Political upheavals scattered the blacksmithing guilds. And as firearms replaced swords, demand faded. The knowledge that had once flowed like molten metal cooled and cracked. No empire lasts forever, and neither do its secrets, especially when those secrets are held in the calloused hands of artisans, not the pages of books. By the 18th century, the technique was lost. Lost not in battle or fire, but in slow neglect, in the fading of memory, in the silences between generations. Gone were the masters who could judge temperature by color and sound. Gone were the apprentices who memorized the rhythms of folding and quenching. Gone was the instinctual dance between craftsman and steel. What remained were the blades themselves, silent and unreplicable. Today, these blades reside in museums, private collections, and the vaults of those who chase history. Some modern smiths attempt to bring the art back to life. They experiment with forge temperatures, carbon alloys, and folding techniques. Some have come close to recreating the patterns. Few have matched the performance. None have fully solved the mystery. Each attempt is a dialogue with the past one conducted in flame and frustration. Because the mystery of Damascus steel is not just metallurgical, it is human. It is the story of a lost language spoken in fire, of a relationship between people and materials so intimate that no one thought to write it down, It is a reminder that not all progress moves forward. Sometimes, knowledge erodes not in disaster, but in neglect. It reminds us that wisdom can be as fragile as steel strong when nurtured, brittle when ignored. We live in an age of digital precision, of atomic analysis, of simulation and synthetic reproduction. And yet a blade made over 1,000 years ago still humbles us, still defies us, still teaches us that craftsmanship is not merely technique, but philosophy. That the greatest tools may be those which reflect their maker. That intuition, patience, and reverence may achieve what science cannot quantify. So what is Damascus steel, really? A miracle of metallurgy? A cultural artifact? A cautionary tale? Perhaps it is all three. It is a mirror to the past, a question to the present, and a challenge to the future. It tells us that genius often arrives without explanation and can vanish just as silently. That beauty can come from imperfection. That legacy is not always preserved in books, but sometimes in blades. And so we remember not just the steel, but the hands that shaped it. Not just the pattern, but the patience. Not just the weapon, but the wisdom it carried. Damascus steel endures not because we understand it, but because we still want to. Maybe in that longing, it lives again. Its rebirth in modern minds is not only romantic, it is instructional. Damascus steel continues to appear in unexpected places. Aerospace alloys, high-performance surgical tools, and even in biomimetic material science. Scientists who study these blades are not merely interested in replication, but in inspiration. What if the forgotten rhythms of the past hold answers to the pressures of the future? The interplay of carbon and iron inside Damascus steel mirrors a harmony rare in modern industry, a balance of strength, flexibility, and durability created not by machines, but by artisans who could feel their way through the forge. The smiths of old were part metallurgist, part artist, part mystic. Their work was science by intuition, theory by instinct. This suggests a profound lesson. Innovation is not only about novelty. Sometimes it is about reverence, about paying attention to what was already known and daring to learn from it again. In Damascus steel, we do not just see engineering, we see philosophy embedded in form. The acceptance of imperfection as strength, the willingness to work with nature, not against it. The surviving blades whisper this lesson. They challenge the arrogance of modernity, the notion that every discovery must be new. They remind us that some of the most advanced technologies we can conceive were already lived, already wielded, already lost, and in those losses lies both tragedy and opportunity. Perhaps we were never meant to rediscover Damascus steel fully. Perhaps it is meant to remain partly in shadow, a legend that keeps us curious. In a world of instant information, there is value in mystery. There is power in not knowing, in searching, reaching, forging anew. Damascus steel is both artifact and ambition. It is what was and what could be. Its past is etched in myth. Its future is up to us. And now, a growing movement seeks to bridge that past with our present. Experimental archaeologists collaborate with metallurgists, linguists, and historians to reconstruct the forgotten rituals of the forge. Every recreated blade is not just a product, it is a question. Have we honored the legacy? Have we earned the right to call it Damascus? Even in popular culture, Damascus steel thrives. It appears in fantasy epics, historical dramas, and survival series, always associated with elite warriors and lost knowledge. But this popularity carries a burden. When myth eclipses method, when imagery replaces inquiry, we risk romanticizing without remembering. So let us not idolize Damascus steel. Let us learn from it. Let it inspire humility in our achievements. Let it remind us that some of the world's greatest creations came not from formulas or factories, but from hands guided by fire, failure, and faith. The real Damascus steel was never just a material. It was a mirror of its maker. And perhaps that is its most enduring lesson of all. Its true resurrection may not lie in the blade itself, but in the mindset behind it. In every challenge we face today, from designing materials for climate resilience to building machines that heal instead of harm, we can choose to apply that same philosophy, to see the process as sacred, to value the maker as much as the mechanism. As global crises accelerate, the lessons of Damascus steel grow more relevant. It tells us that materials can carry meaning, that objects can embody ethics, and that human legacy is often coded in craft. A Damascus blade is a story you can hold. A record of thinking in heat and rhythm. It speaks of hands that practiced their truth until it became tradition. Perhaps in the end, that is what Damascus steel offers. Not a mystery to be solved, but a model to be emulated. It is less about metal and more about memory. Less about lost technique and more about remembered reverence. It is a challenge to reimagine progress, not as dominance over matter, but collaboration with it. And if we listen to what these ancient blades are still saying, we might find that the future of technology lies not in forgetting the past, but in forging forward with its fire still in our hands. In educational circles, the story of Damascus steel is increasingly integrated into discussions of cross-disciplinary learning. Here, students of history, chemistry, art, and philosophy are encouraged to interpret these blades as windows into a civilization that valued balance, a society that thrived not just on technological achievement but on the relationship between hand, heart, and material. Modern curricula now use Damascus steel to bridge STEM with the humanities, a union our time desperately needs. In business, the mystique of Damascus has become a branding magnet. High-end knives, luxury watches, and even jewelry lines tout Damascus as shorthand for authenticity and craftsmanship. But too often, this marketing reduces a complex cultural artifact to aesthetic patterning. The swirls of the steel become empty ornament unless paired with context, care, and story. To where Damascus should mean more than owning something sharp, it should mean carrying something wise. Meanwhile, in blacksmithing communities, a quiet renaissance unfolds. Forums, forge schools, and backyard smithies light up with sparks of experimentation. Makers trade grainy footage of patterns emerging, glowing red and cooling into ghostly lines. They speak a shared language, not one of metallurgy alone, but of listening to the blade, of accepting failure as teacher, and of progress as spiral, not line. Some even propose that Damascus steel, in its original spiritual form, may never have been just about the metal. It may have also been about timing, community, and generational continuity. That without a culture willing to protect and pass down, even the most powerful tools become silent. And perhaps this is why the blade outlives the blueprint, because memory is stronger than manual. It is possible that in 1,000 years someone will hold one of our modern creations and ask the same questions we now ask of Damascus. How did they do this? What were they thinking? What have we lost? That is the burden and the beauty of legacy. So we return to the blade. We hold it to the light. We trace its curves and wonder not just how but why. And in doing so we remember that every innovation holds its breath in a moment, that every flame, if fed, can spark a future. That every edge, when honored, cuts through time. Damascus steel is not dead. It is dreaming, and we are still waking up to what it meant and what it can still become.